Daniel and Lacey Whitmore were the couple everyone admired, smiling faces, weekend getaways, and a love story that looked perfect from the outside. But just weeks after their 10th anniversary, one would be found dead at the bottom of the stairs, and the other buried miles away in a shallow grave. What seemed like a tragic case of domestic violence unraveled into something far darker, a tale of obsession, deception, and a calculated double murder that no one saw coming. Daniel and Lacey Whitmore were the kind of couple people admired from afar. Living in a charming 2-story home near Halston Lake in Oregon, they painted a picture of perfect harmony. Their lives seemed plucked from a magazine, morning coffees on the porch, afternoon walks with their golden retriever, weekend getaways to the coast. Lacey was a school counselor, loved by students and respected by colleagues. Daniel worked as a project manager for a construction company, often praised for his calm demeanor and dedication. Together, they were the golden couple of the neighborhood, always waving to neighbors, always smiling. Their social media told the same story. Every photo showed happiness, candlelit dinners, sunny hikes, and handwritten love notes on the fridge. Friends would comment, "Goals," or "You two are perfect together." Even their arguments, if they ever had them, seemed invisible. No slammed doors, no loud voices. Just quiet contentment that most could only hope for. They hosted barbecues in the summer, invited neighbors for hot cocoa in the winter, and decorated their home with an effortless charm that made guests feel instantly welcome. But sometimes, things looked better from the outside. Beneath the surface, there were signs, small cracks no one noticed. Daniel had grown quieter in recent months. He was still kind, still present, but something in his eyes had changed. He seemed distracted, always thinking. Lacey had started spending more time alone, sitting by the lake with her journal. She would stay after work more often, telling friends she just needed to clear her head, but no one thought much of it. Every couple has seasons, they said, and the Whitmores always bounced back. In early March, things seemed especially peaceful. Lacey posted a photo of the two of them laughing on the couch, their dog nestled between them. The caption read, "Still my best friend after all these years." It got hundreds of likes. People loved them. They were hope in a world full of broken relationships. That's why what happened next hit the town so hard. On a Monday morning, Daniel didn't show up to work. He never missed a day without calling. His coworkers waited, then called, then waited again. No answer. They reached out to Lacey, but her phone was off. Concern turned to alarm. A colleague finally contacted the police, asking for a wellness check at the Whitmore house. The responding officer found the front door unlocked. The house was silent. Nothing seemed out of place. No broken windows, no signs of theft. But at the base of the staircase, everything changed. Lacey's body lay crumpled and cold. Blood had dried under her head, and a trail of smudges led partway down the stairs. There were scratches on the floor, a shattered vase nearby. It didn't look like an accident, and Daniel was gone. His keys, wallet, and phone were inside the house. His car was still parked outside. No note, no sign of where he might have gone. Just a happy home turned crime scene, and a town full of questions no one could answer yet. The discovery of Lacey Whitmore's body sent shockwaves through the small town of Halston. News spread quickly, whispered from one neighbor to the next, growing more confusing with every retelling. The idea that someone as gentle and well-loved as Lacey could end up dead in her own home didn't seem real. And with Daniel nowhere to be found, suspicion thickened in the air. People wondered aloud what might have happened. Some assumed he had killed her in a moment of rage and fled. Others were sure he was missing because he too had been hurt. The only thing everyone agreed on was that nothing added up. The police wasted no time launching an investigation. Crime scene technicians combed through the house, taking photographs, collecting fingerprints, and searching for signs of forced entry. But nothing indicated a break-in. There were no broken locks, no smashed windows. Whoever had been there either had a key or never left. Lacey's body told part of the story. She had suffered blunt force trauma to the back of her head. There were bruises on her arms and a few deep scratches on her right hand, suggesting a struggle. The blood on the staircase wasn't consistent with a fall. It was too spread out, too deliberate. Investigators quickly focused on Daniel. Statistically, they knew in cases like this, the spouse was often involved. But they also had to consider the fact that Daniel had seemingly vanished without a trace. No witnesses had seen him leave. His phone, last used around 11:30 p.m. the night before, had been left charging in the kitchen. His car, untouched. Security cameras from nearby homes were pulled for any clues. One camera caught a shadowy figure leaving the house on foot just before midnight. The shape resembled Daniel's build, but the footage was too blurry to be definitive. No one saw where the figure went after walking out of frame. A search was launched across Halston and into the surrounding woods. Police dogs were brought in. Volunteers combed through trails and parks. Days passed with no trace of Daniel. His bank accounts showed no recent activity. His work emails had gone unanswered. Not a single withdrawal, call, or message. Friends and family were brought in for questioning. Most were shocked. They described Daniel as patient, loving, soft-spoken. No one could recall a time he raised his voice, let alone his hand. But the absence of any suspects other than Daniel left investigators frustrated. Then came the discovery that changed everything. A hiker, walking through the forest 10 miles from Halston, noticed something odd. Beneath a pile of leaves, what looked like a boot led to a horrifying find. Daniel's body, half buried in a shallow grave. His hands were bound with rope, and he had been shot twice in the chest. The scene was brutal and deliberate. Suddenly, the man suspected of murder was now a victim himself. And what had first appeared to be a case of domestic violence was now looking like something far more calculated. Someone had wanted both Daniel and Lacey dead, and had nearly gotten away with it, with Daniel's body found in a shallow grave and the reality of a double homicide confirmed. The investigation took a sharp turn. What was once seen as a possible domestic incident had become something far more sinister. The detectives were now looking for a killer who had managed to deceive everyone, not just the community, but law enforcement too. Whoever had done this knew the couple well enough to stage a believable narrative and hide their tracks with chilling precision. The crime scene in the woods provided few clues. The grave was hastily dug, and heavy rain from the previous night had washed away any useful footprints or tire tracks. But the bindings on Daniel's wrists were specific, a type of nylon cord often used by contractors or climbers. The gun used had no identifying marks. No shell casings were left behind, and the bullets had been removed from his body, indicating a level of planning. Whoever committed the crime had not only intended to kill, but to erase any evidence of their presence. Investigators returned to the Whitmore home with fresh eyes. If the killer knew the couple, there had to be a connection buried somewhere in their lives. Laptops, notebooks, and mail were re-examined. Daniel's computer held mostly work-related documents and nothing suspicious. Lacey's, however, contained a few password-protected folders. After securing a warrant and unlocking the contents, detectives found a collection of emails saved separately from her normal inbox. These weren't addressed to friends or family, but to a man named Tyler Cross. Tyler was a real estate developer based in Seattle. His name had never come up in earlier interviews, and he had no immediate ties to Halston. But the emails told a different story. Lacey had been corresponding with him for almost a year. Their messages started professionally, but slowly grew more personal, emotional even. She wrote about feeling distant from Daniel, unsure of her marriage, and admitted to spending weekends alone, thinking about what her life could have been. Tyler responded with compassion, encouragement, and increasing affection. While there was no direct mention of an affair, the tone suggested a deeper connection had formed. One email stood out. Dated just 2 weeks before her death, Lacey wrote, "I feel like someone's watching me. Not Daniel. It's something else. I don't know if I'm imagining it, but I feel like I've crossed a line I can't go back from." That message triggered alarm bells. It hinted at fear, guilt, and danger. And when detectives pulled phone records, they discovered multiple calls between Lacey and a number registered to Tyler, some lasting over an hour. Tyler Cross quickly moved from a name in an inbox to the primary person of interest. When police contacted him, he seemed calm, even cooperative. He admitted to knowing Lacey and confirmed their email exchanges, claiming they had bonded over shared struggles. He denied ever meeting her in person and stated he had not been in Halston for years. But surveillance footage told a different story. A camera from a gas station on the edge of town captured Tyler filling up his car the night of Lacey's death. The timestamp matched the window in which she was believed to have been killed. His alibi had just collapsed. When Tyler Cross's alibi unraveled, detectives began to dig deeper into his movements and past behavior. The gas station footage placed him in Halston on the night Lacey died, contradicting his earlier claim of being in Seattle. Investigators also discovered that he had checked into a small, off-the-grid rental cabin just outside of town under a false name. The booking was made in cash, and no identification had been required. It was the kind of place someone might go if they didn't want to be found. It became clear that Tyler hadn't just visited Halston that weekend. He had planned for secrecy. The cabin itself yielded more clues. Hidden in a drawer was a crumpled photograph of Lacey, clearly printed from her social media profile. Under the mattress, police found a notebook filled with disturbing entries. Many pages were dedicated to Tyler's thoughts about Lacey, written in an obsessive tone. He wrote about their connection, how she was different from other women, and how she deserved to be rescued. One entry stood out. It read, "If she won't leave him, I'll take her away myself. She belongs to me." That sentence changed everything. The investigation, once shrouded in speculation, now had motive and intent. Tyler had developed a fixation on Lacey, and over time had convinced himself that they were meant to be together. Her hesitation and attempts to pull back had likely triggered his anger. And when she began reconnecting with Daniel, Tyler must have seen it as a betrayal. A second search of the Whitmore home uncovered something previously missed: a flash drive, hidden inside a hollowed-out book in Daniel's study. The files on it revealed that Daniel had grown suspicious in the weeks leading up to his death. He had accessed Lacey's email and discovered her exchanges with Tyler. Rather than confront her directly, he had begun documenting everything saving. Emails, noting phone calls, and writing down license plate numbers of unfamiliar cars parked near their house. Daniel had sensed danger, but he hadn't realized how close it really was. On the night of the murder, investigators now believe Tyler waited until late evening before approaching the house. He likely expected to find Lacey alone. When things escalated into a confrontation, she tried to fight back. The struggle left her injured and disoriented. Daniel, returning home from a late walk or errand, arrived in the middle of the attack. Tyler, desperate to cover his tracks, overpowered him. After binding Daniel's hands, he drove him deep into the woods and shot him, then buried the body in a shallow grave. What had initially looked like a crime of passion was now understood to be a calculated double murder. Tyler had driven back to Seattle after the killings, likely confident that Daniel would be blamed. But the flash drive and his own paper trail had betrayed him. With mounting evidence and pressure, it was only a matter of time before the truth came out completely. The picture of a grieving outsider Tyler had painted was falling apart. What remained was a portrait of obsession, manipulation, and cold-blooded violence. As the case against Tyler Cross strengthened, investigators moved quickly to secure an arrest warrant. The evidence was no longer circumstantial, it was solid and damning. From the gas station footage to the hidden notebook filled with disturbing thoughts, everything pointed to Tyler as the killer. He had constructed a fantasy in which Lacey was the center, and when reality didn't match his obsession, he chose to destroy what he couldn't control. The illusion of a heartbroken admirer shattered. Tyler had never been a victim of unrequited love. He had been a predator hiding behind charm and sympathy. When police arrived at his Seattle apartment, Tyler didn't resist arrest. In fact, he seemed almost relieved. During the interrogation, his demeanor was cold and detached. He admitted to the affair, finally revealing that he had visited Halston multiple times over the past year, often parking several streets away and watching the Whitmore house from a distance. He denied any intention to harm either Lacey or Daniel, but couldn't explain why his handwriting was found in the notebook describing the plan to take her away. When shown the flash drive Daniel had compiled, he became visibly shaken. The reality that Daniel had been quietly documenting everything seemed to unsettle him more than the murder charges themselves. Prosecutors pieced together a timeline that left little room for doubt. Tyler arrived in Halston on a Friday evening and stayed at the remote cabin. He watched the house from a distance and waited until Sunday night to make his move, believing Lacey would be alone. Instead, she resisted his advances and things spiraled into violence. When Daniel returned and interrupted the confrontation, Tyler made the fatal decision to eliminate both of them. The calculated nature of the crimes removing bullets, binding Daniel, staging the house, showed not only premeditation, but also a disturbing lack of remorse. In court, the community of Halston watched in silence as the details unfolded. Friends and neighbors who once believed they knew everything about Daniel and Lacey now sat in disbelief at the horror they'd lived beside. Tyler's trial lasted 2 weeks, ending in a swift conviction. He was found guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Even behind bars, he never apologized. The tragedy left scars across the quiet town. The Whitmore home remained empty for months, a silent reminder of what had been lost. The once idyllic house where laughter once echoed was now just another crime. Seen in a file, another story with a warning hidden inside. What made it harder was how convincing the surface had been. The perfect couple, the perfect life, and it all seemed so real, Dot. But in the end, it wasn't their marriage that was broken. It was someone else's envy, obsession, and selfishness that shattered everything. Daniel and Lacey had been a happy couple. It wasn't their love that failed. It was the world that let someone with darkness in his heart get too close. And no one had seen it coming until it was far too late.